Not only can I potentially rupture the eardrum, but as I do that, there's nerves that run down behind the jaw that can potentially facilitate a knockout, the trigeminal nerves that run through here. So if I'm here, bang, right here.
Ouch. Just watching you go that fast, you can tell it's going to lay the dude out.
It'll potentially, yeah.
For some.
And I could do it to this.
This is a voice of experience then, right?
Yeah, I've been hit by Jared plenty of times and it works.
Again, the dynamics change. If you've never trained to defend against these angles, it's going to be very difficult to get in as that's coming up. If you don't know, and the timing is different. Because this is a weapon like this, I've got to get in or I've got to get out. Use my foot.
Officer Jared.
Back on the show.
His sparring partner, Enos.
Welcome out.
Former cop. Current cop.
Reserve still, former full-time.
Yep. Team peers know you. You've been around a while.
Yeah, I have 4 or 5 years so.
Yeah, how's it been for you?
It's been the most difficult 4 or 5 years of my life, but I'm sticking around, so.
You do answer my texts these days, so that's good.
I do. Yes, I'm making myself more available to be on the show, and I'm trying to stick around a little bit more. I've got in these last 4 or 5 years, I've had a lot of family changes. I'm trying not to travel as much as I used to. So.
Cool. Years ago, we had a conversation, OJ and myself, talking about the differences between MMA and what can generally be called street fighting. Mm-hmm. That's what this video is about.
Yeah, so basically, and a lot of people know my background, but I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, Filipino martial arts, several other Western boxing stuff for a long time, some of it for over 20 years. And so I've dabbled in the arts, and it's what I do for a living now. I travel around the world training special forces, SWAT teams in several different countries. And I've got a lot of experience on the street, I used to be a tactical meter maid. No. He always makes fun of my...
I do. He was a SWAT guy, is what he was. He was an entry team guy, and every time he's been reassigned now. You do what now? Street duty.
Patrol. And to tell you the truth...
And I tell him he's a meter maid, he always laughs.
Yeah, tactical meter maid.
Yeah.
But
World of difference.
And to be honest, on street patrol is where officers get in the most fights, because no one really wants to fight the SWAT team when they come slamming down your door in the middle of the night, throwing flashbangs and whatnot. But,
right.
But that's that. So I've got a little bit of background. Even before I was a police officer, I worked as a bouncer in Honolulu, Hawaii, while I was going to university. So I got a lot of experience in street type of encounters.
Actual confrontations.
Actual confrontations, more than I can count. So.
And also, OJ travels the world teaching police forces, militaries around the world. That's one reason he's Scotia times in TMP. That's kind of his job.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between mixed martial arts and street fighting. It's a big topic, big debate, and there are differences. I'll be the first to tell you that being a good mixed martial arts fighter will make you good in some situations on the streets. But in the street, you're going from a controlled environment to an out of control environment, and now you have variables that will come into play that you will not face in a sport situation. And when you're continually training for a sport, everyone should understand the notion of muscle memory. You'll train the way you fight, and you'll fight the way that you've trained. And so if you're not training for some of these street particular or unique variables, then the likelihood that you'll actually use techniques for those particular situations in the real world is not likely, based off of, again, physiological stress symptoms, doing under stress what you've trained in the gym.
So they may bounce back to MMA.
Exactly.
Stuff. Okay.
Yeah. MMA, just mixed martial arts, by virtue of the term, means combining disciplines into a system that's appropriate for that particular sport.
Awesome. So you got the credibility, you've taught, you're still teaching. This isn't the end all. Lots of different stuff. What are we talking about in this video?
So I want some of the things we're going to focus on, and we could go on for ages on this particular topic, but some of the things we're going to focus on are some of the unique elements to street fighting that MMA will not prepare someone for. Like I said, if someone trains MMA, then they've probably got good striking. They've probably got good timing and speed and power and fighting principles and techniques that will work in certain street situations. But when you throw in some of the variables like weapons is one thing we're going to talk about. Talk about multiple assailants. We're going to talk about environmental restrictions or unique environmental factors. We'll talk about, and there's several of these things that we could get into. The strikes, the difference in street striking versus sport striking. grappling, difference in the appropriateness of sport strike grappling in a street scenario. So we're going to address those, primarily those 5 elements. And if we have time, we'll talk about some more.
Beautiful. Okay. So this is a guy you wanted to come to the vid too, right?
Yes.
You were talking him up. He's like, I want Enos to come be my sparring. You had some others in mind?
Yeah,
buddy. He was talking you up, dude.
Enos, I have a lot of respect for this. We met about 19 years ago at a Brazilian Jiu-jitsu gym here in Salt Lake, and then we later met when we both worked as police officers together. I was the head defensive tactics instructor for the Salt Lake City Police Academy. Enos was one of my main adjunct instructors for defensive tactics. So
nice.
I know what he does. I know he's got the experience on the street, so he's not to be reckoned with.
I hear you. Yeah. Okay, let's go into that first one, weapons. What you got? So talk to us about difference between MMA, street fighting, and the term street fighting, by the way, broad.
Okay.
Right?
Yes,
is there anything you want to say about the term street fighting? Because maybe some guys get excited about it.
Yeah, so street fighting, you can, just like MMA, I mean, what street fighting can be very broad. It could be a civilian self-defense scenario. It could be a police officer fighting on the street. It could be a security guard fighting on the street. It could be a soldier fighting on the street. Each of these has unique elements. One of those is weapons, the availability, the presence of weapons. Because even if the bad guy doesn't have a weapon, there are still lots of weapons present. They may be on your belt or maybe concealed carry, civilian scenario. I may have a firearm, I may have a knife somewhere. So, obviously if I'm a soldier or something, I've probably got a long gun somewhere. So there's weapons present in a lot of these situations. And the mission may be different, so what can I actually do legally?
Do you have limitations by your profession, for instance?
By your profession.
Rules of engagement.
So in addition to whatever the local laws might be, you may have some kind of ROE, rules of engagement, or policy and procedure that dictates what you can and cannot do.
What do you want to assume for this video on what you're going to show these guys? Do you want to assume that it is an all-out civilian-to-civilian street fight where your life is in danger?
We're going to touch more on that, yes.
I think that's more interesting what guys are clicking on this video
and
for.
I do too, so we're going to touch more on that.
You'll have a couple security guards, but...
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, like I said, there's a lot of it's going to be the same, but we don't have to, and you're more dealing with state and local laws.
Sure.
And also,
the guys get it.
And also moral inhibition. Some people, they just can't bring themselves to execute violence on another individual. Not execute another individual, execute violence on another individual.
Nice clarification. So, you don't have any moral inhibitions at all from what I've seen.
None whatsoever, no. Coming from you, that doesn't mean a whole lot. So.
Okay, back to weapons.
Okay, so,
first difference between MMA and street fighting, the presence of weapons.
Presence of weapons, or the potential presence. And you can put weapons into 3 categories. One is an actual designated, what I call a designated weapon, something that's designed to be a weapon, a tactical knife, a spannable baton, a tomahawk, something like that.
Okay.
Then you could have environmental weapons, the availability of environmental weapons, improvised weapons. So there may be, a brick or a rock that I might pick up and use as a weapon. And then...
what if the guy has a weapon and you don't?
Exactly.
So you went out of the house that day, you have nothing but open hand.
Exactly. So that's,
you're a civilian. You're not a trained guy with all the speed, performance, and muscle memory that you always talk to us about. You're not that guy. And you come up with a guy that has a knife. I mean, that's a whole freaking series of videos.
So when you get into the dynamic of edge, and you're right, I'm just going to touch on that.
That's all we can do. We don't have time.
Yeah, but when you get into the, and I'm going to grab a training knife here.
Sure.
So when you get into the dynamics of an edged weapon, this is a training blade. So just so you know, I'm not going to be stabbing at each other with live blades. But so when you get into the dynamics of an edged weapon, things change. Okay, because it can be your greatest counter against a grappler. It can be, and now we're assuming in this situation that my assailant has a weapon and I don't. But let's just talk about common empty hand type defenses. Okay, so for example. A common defense against, for example, a round punch or a hook would be a cover, where I'm using my glove or my arm to cover. So if I'm here and I throw a hooking punch here, he's covering right there, or maybe it's here. Okay. Now, if I did that and I had a knife and he was covering, then that could potentially come around. And if it doesn't hit his head, then on the way out, I could be cutting it back across his arm.
Wicked.
So no, if it's a common, people that don't understand edged weapons, martial arts, even if they try and address it, but they're really not an edged weapon focused martial art, they'll do something like a block, okay? And say you did a block against this, if I was coming down with my arm, that might work. Now say I had a knife, and I come here, and I pull back.
You just cut his tendon.
And so whether I did that intentionally or unintentionally, that's something that could happen. Now, if it was like an X-type block where I come in here,
Either way, he's getting cut.
he's getting cut.
And that's in MMA, you will never see that.
Exactly.
So they can go in with absolute confidence and
So
landing some punches, and they're not going to get a tendon cut.
in an edge weapon scenario, attacking the arms is something that is very prevalent, whereas in an MMA type scenario, striking at the arms is not going to work. Okay, I'm not going to be effective at hitting his arms. But if I have a knife,
excellent point.
Then I can keep at a safe distance and I can attack his arm.
Because without his arms, he can't fight.
Exactly. It's called defanging the snake is the principle.
Yeah.
Take the fangs out of a snake and it can't bite, a poisonous snake and it can't hurt you. So it's so the principle of attacking the appendages. So coming here, he may try to defend it, and if I turn it, then I've gone from what we call a thrust and slash principle. So I'm thrusting here, I turn the knife, and I've just cut his arm. Okay, and that could be a fight ender. It may not kill him here and now, but it's going to be extremely distracting. It's going to create openings for me to get in and finish the fight, or potentially the ability to disengage if I'm the one that's using it as a defensive tactic. But things that you would typically do versus an empty hand, okay, may not necessarily work versus a knife, based on the ability to puncture and to cut. All I need to do is this motion right here with the knife. It may not be a lot of power there, but if I get the tip of that steel right into someone's eye, that's going to be a potential fight finisher. Just the matter, right there. Just that motion right there. Okay, I can do it with my fingers also as a flick to distract and attack the eyes, which, again, MMA thing that cannot be done in MMA that can be done on the street, attacking the eyes. Again, it's not a fight finisher, it's a distraction. It's disrupting their OODA cycle and creating an opening for you to go to your next step. So, and preventing his ability to orientate himself, make a plan, and act on me. So
Let me stop you a sec.
Sure.
So thought, and the audience may be thinking this. So guy comes up against a skilled MMA guy. He has a blade. Does it equalize the situation? The
Potentially.
less skilled guy has a blade. The more skilled fighter. Enos, what do you think? We'll get him in here too.
Yes, it can, depending on, once again, the purpose of, the assailant versus the defender.
There's a lot of variables. We know that. There's 1,000 variables, but I'm just kind of broad stroke.
And just one thing on that too, like for example, if I'm an orthodox boxer, right, or MMA fighter, typically my dominant side is going to be my rear.
There's his stance he's talked to you guys about a lot.
So this is going to be essentially my position. I'm going to be I'm not going to be too low. I'm going to be in this type of a position, and the point here is my dominant hand is back, because that's typically what an orthodox fighter is going to do. Whereas a southpaw would be just the opposite, where they're going to a lefty, where they're going to fight right hand and they're going to move. Now, what I just did there is another street fighting principle that we'll talk about when we get into multiple opponents, is the ability to fight left or right lead. Because I could be here, focusing on someone, and I could move to this direction just by turning here, but I'm still keeping him, so I could be able to fight this direction and this direction without having to put someone to my outside line. By going, if I was here, and then I turn to you, now I've just put him to my blind side. Whereas if I'm able to keep him here, even better, line my opponents up, use my footwork to get to a position where I'm getting my opponents in a line, so I'm only doing it one at a time. But the ability to go from a left lead to a right lead position is one of the differences that a lot of people don't train in MMA. So
Understand that.
So now.
But the weapons, though, you're talking knives. Any other weapons you want to talk about in differences?
Yes. So you can break weapons down into two categories. You can go edge weapon, and then you go impact weapon. Okay.
And we're leaving out the gun for now. Is that right?
Leaving out the gun. Yeah.
Okay.
So by impact weapon, I mean this is just something that could represent a crowbar, a hammer.
Yep.
It could represent a branch.
Expandable baton.
Expandable baton.
Yeah.
So now with this, the principles of power are a little more important. Because we're talking about blunt trauma. You're talking about energy transfer and the ability to actually create damage through that. So again, the dynamics change. If you've never trained to defend against these angles, it's going to be very difficult to get in as that's coming out at you.
You're going to get whacked, I'm thinking.
If you don't know, and the timing is different. Because this is a weapon like this, I've got to get in or I've got to get out. use my footwork, and I got to time my entry. And if you don't train for how to deal with that, then again, it's a variable that's. And I've seen, there's a video where it happened. I think it was the year before last. And it's there's you can show examples of everything, but there was a video of in Brazil where a couple of MMA fighters got into a street fight at a gas station, instigated apparently the incident, but one of them ended up in hospital and the other one ended up running away. What happened was multiple opponents with sticks, and it's obvious from the video that they hadn't dealt with one weapons, two multiple opponents. The ability to kind of train yourself to break out of that focus on here and train for a 360-degree environment. And that's, for street fighting, that's important because what we call friends, family, sympathizers. Bad guys have friends, bad guys have family, and yeah, bad guys have sympathizers. And so you don't want to assume that it's a one-on-one situation. So,
Enos, and guys want to know, he has a stick, you're unarmed, so we're not dealing with a knife now, we're just dealing with that. Is charging him a good option? Get him on the ground so he loses his advantage of swinging that around?
No, because timing, distance, he's got the upper hand. He's got an extra 3 feet on me. Mm-hmm. So for me, being a grappler, going in, shooting in head first,
you're going to get lit?
Right.
What are you going to do then?
What am I going to do? I'm going to create space.
So go ahead, play it out a little bit.
So
and this is not final. This is just interesting.
Yeah, no,
an academic discussion.
And so, for example, say, and again, we're talking about timing, footwork, okay? Because the footwork of an MMA fighter, training is good for that particular scenario and for some street scenarios. But when you're dealing now with a longer weapon, it's what we call takeoff footwork, and the ability to actually, it's almost like a sprinter. Because if he's got that much reach on me, then I need to time, and so I got to stay out or I got to get in. If I try and get in at the wrong time, I'm going to get smacked on my way in. Okay, so I've got to
in the airport
and do what we call and see what he just naturally did. That's a natural thing to do, and it's actually potentially a good defense. So I can't assume that I'm going to be able to get a hold of that arm without him bringing this hand and trying to push me away. So that's why I've got to be able to come in and what we call move to. It's what we call the zero pressure principle. I'm not going to get into that too much, but once I get
play
in,
that same thing over again.
So I've seen he's drawn with the weapon back, and this is where I make my entry, and then I get into controlling the weapon limb. So this is where we would get into a potential stand-up, clinch, grapple type situation. But what I've done is effectively take away his ability to use that weapon. Now, if that's my tactic, I better know how to fight from a clinch position. Okay, and when you fight from a clinch position, you've got strikes and you've got
stuff we'll cover here in a sec.
Strikes, takedowns, joint manipulations.
Okay, time's flying by.
Okay.
So weapons. Anything you want to say about anything else about the stick? Or baton, or whatever you want to call it.
We could go on.
Yeah, that could be a whole video.
Yeah, it could be a whole video. So, but the principle being.
And we have done a video. We did the baton video.
And actually, this is one of the points I was making earlier. So I don't want to point this. If I have an MMA fighter and I have a knife in my hand, it's likely that this is how I'm going to stand, and I can be affected by just thrusting that out like I'm boxing. That could potentially be effective. But the problem with that is, which is why you don't see fencers fight from this position, is if he has a knife also, so go and take that and go to an orthodox boxing position in your right hand. So are you a southpaw?
Yeah.
Okay, southpaw. Couldn't remember. It's been a while since we worked together. So right here, he's got his weapon in his rear hand, and this hand forward. That would be a natural thing to do for an MMA type fighter. Now what I would do, if I had a blade also, is I would move to his outside line and attack this arm. Okay? Because all this is right now is a target for me to cut, because I have a weapon, right? So the tactic is not transferable.
It's completely different from MMA.
Completely different MMA. So so we're here, so I'm going to keep away from that back. I'm going to attack this, and by doing it from this angle, I'm keeping away from that.
Staying away from the fang.
From his fang, and attacking what he's giving me. I don't need to attack his face, his neck, the more vital areas. That's going to be significant. Okay, and a few of those. Okay, if he hasn't clued in on tactics real quick, which likely is not going to happen in the middle of that fight, he's going to start cluing in on tactics. Because combative street encounters are not stick and move encounters. Typically,
they're not choreographed at all.
They're not choreographed. It's not the sport model. It's a very fast and furious. It's going to happen in a few seconds. The outcome of the fight, a lot of the times, are determined in the first few seconds.
That's a huge difference right there.
It's a very aggressive energy.
Yeah.
Normally, typically. There's always going to find exceptions to those rules.
Absolutely. Okay, weapons. We got to press just for time. I want this to be a single-parter.
Sure.
And that was a real broad stroke on weapons.
It
And
was.
then you kind of already talked about multiple opponents and about different stances against multiple opponents.
Yeah, so-
I really liked what you said about how the sympathizers can come into the fight. People you
Exactly.
do not expect to be part of the fight. Boom, they're on top of you.
Yeah, and
Have you had that happen as a cop? You
yeah.
too, Enos.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Did it take you by surprise?
It does, definitely, because you get tunnel vision when there's an altercation. You focus, you get tunnel vision, and just for a brief second, if you lose that, you get tunnel vision, you forget about the 360. And so that's constantly grilled in your mind. 360, watch your six.
Yeah.
Watch your
Hopefully
back.
your partner's there watching your back too.
Yeah, and there's a lot of situations that just escalate before you even have a back, and so you got to be able to maintain your wits about you, and hopefully your training and your kicks in, and when you're dealing with one person, when you have the opening, you're scanning, just like firearms tech people train to do, scan after each course of fire so that you're scanning for threats.
How
Additional
about
threats.
we're talking about multiple assailants, differences to MMA, street fighting, verbal control.
Yeah.
You don't see that in MMA. They're not like, hey, get down, and using maybe an intimidation
Well,
of verbal commands. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. There's verbal commands will do a couple things. One is they'll keep you breathing. People tend to hyperventilate in a stressful scenario. They'll keep you breathing. They also create witnesses. If I'm using very defensive language, I've got now the guy just walking down the street saying, hey, I heard him to get away from me, stop hurting me, I'm afraid for my safety, using this type of verbiage, and now that's going to make a huge difference when you get to one of the follow-up fights, which is going to be the one that happens in court, so potentially. So it also helps there's some kind of misunderstanding, and so maybe it potentially does help
Absolutely.
the assailant to know exactly what your intentions are.
Can you demo that with Enos real quick?
Sure. So when I teach, even in a civilian scenario, self-defense situation, I don't like to teach people to take this aggressive posture. This is the posture that is going to escalate a situation, and I don't want the situation to escalate. I want things to be resolved potentially without the best fight. The fight you will always survive is the one that you've been able to avoid. Okay, so if I can avoid that, that's all the better. Now, if I go to this position, this is an aggressive posture. So what I'd like to teach people is go into it's still a fighting position, but I'm presented forward, and it's a very non-aggressive position. So I don't want any trouble. Okay, just leave. I don't want to have to hurt you. Okay, so then I go into whatever my tactics are going to be. Okay, so from this position, again, whether I'm coming up to elbows, my knees, I go into a clench, takedowns, whatever the situation is going to be. This is my position, my verbiage, very defensive. It's not an ego thing. I don't want to be, I'm going to kick your ass kind of a thing.
You're asking for it then.
Exactly. And that doesn't
Why
look-
fight when you don't have to?
Exactly. It's going to be, I don't want trouble. Why don't you just leave? Get away from me. Now I've created witnesses. Everyone's got a camera out nowadays. There's a good chance someone's going to have the video.
It's going to be a
There's
security camera. It's going to be iPhone video.
And it's going to be on
it's
YouTube
going to be
tomorrow,
a YouTube,
right? So
probably on my channel.
So it's better,
Just kidding.
exactly. So it's better to be looking like the defensive one than the one that's instigating in the fight.
Trying to diffuse it.
Yeah, because that's going to end up in court potentially.
Okay, let me ask you this. So in the movie Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood talks about the gunfight, how he prioritizes who he's going to shoot first by their body language, by who he thinks presents the greatest danger to him. Would you do that in multiple assailants?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
So you
Triage.
look, this guy presents the biggest danger to me. I got to take him out first.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You want to eliminate the biggest threat first, and then kind of work your way down from there. And there's lots of things you can do in that. Training your footwork to be able to, like for example, if I'm here, I can move this direction really quick. If I got stuck between two people, if I have good footwork, right? So I could go from here to this position, and I can fight here, and I can fight here. Now, ideally, I want to line up, like I said earlier, I want to line up my opponents so I'm dealing with one at a time. But in some situations, that may not be possible. So I want to be able to, even in gunfighting, this is how I teach. I teach here, and I teach to shoot from what I call a false lead position. So I would teach to shoot, I'm going to grab a gun real quickly, just
Okay.
I'll put them up this side, and a stick. So I can shoot from this position here, and I can shoot from this position also, without even having to move or pivot. Because if I pivot, now I've put him to my outside line, and I've lost a lot of my peripheral vision.
Or like we did in Hitman, shoot from the freaking hip.
Yeah, exactly. So I can
lock
shoot from these positions here, but my feet I don't have to pivot. That's slow, and also puts me in potentially a bad
So you're
position.
twisting?
We call it a side step. So it's here, and all it is if I've got a true 45-degree position, and I do this motion, now I've just got a true 45, but now my shoulders are in what we call a false lead position. And again, this is tactics we don't want to get too much into right now because that's another topic. But false lead meaning I'm a right-hand dominant fighter. I've got my right leg forward, but my left shoulder is coming forward. And if I, for example, if I did have a weapon myself, I can strike here. And I can strike
And we've covered
here.
that in our other videos. Guys need to catch up to the body work we've done to this point.
Yeah.
Because OJ has taught a lot what he's talking about here.
Yes.
I'm going to kind of move one of the points we're going to talk about. Okay. So we're talking about multiple assailants. You were going to go into environmentals. Why don't we push up strikes? Because I think that drives to a huge difference in MMA between a street fight. Let's say you have 3 guys. Are you going to be dicking around trying to get punches on these guys? Are you going to do it as much as you can? Let's say it's gone to this, that it's a true fight maybe for your life. Are you going to take that guy down as fast as you possibly can? One strike is all the better because then you can deal with the other 2.
Yeah, so maximum damage, minimum time is one of the points.
So we're going to talk about strikes now.
Yes. So maximum damage, minimum time. When we talk about strikes, we're talking about hands, forearms, elbows, knees, feet, shins, headbutts. Okay, these are all strikes. These are all blood trauma causing tools, and so that's what and
some of which you don't see in MMA.
Some you don't.
They're illegal.
Headbutts is one that you won't see in MMA. Most of the other ones you'll see. Now the problem that one of the things that we're talking about difference here in a street situation, if I train myself to hit with my hands open, then that's going to be potentially a better scenario for me because if I need to continue fighting, if I need to potentially manipulate a weapon, drive a car, do something, dial on a cell phone afterwards, if I've been using my fists as clubs and hitting people in the head, there's a very, very good chance that I've broken some bones in those hands if I'm hitting strong and hard. I know because I've got a screw in my thumb right now from just that experience. So that the hands have lots of little small bones, and unless like the karate masters in Okinawa that sit there all day hitting a piece of wood, okay, to strengthen my hands. Most people, I think, aren't going to be doing that to toughen up their hands. And
There's another video though, of strikes and hand position.
Sure,
There's probably
exactly.
1,000 out there already.
Exactly. So rather than using my fists, I can do the same damage by using my hands. Okay. Now, for example, open palm. Now it's the heel palm. And what I mean by that
Hold
is
on, show that real quick because a lot of guys may not be. Show your open palm. Just sting your arm. Because now this bone is straight down.
Exactly.
That's like a stick that he's hitting the dude with, and there's nothing compressible now. It hits here.
Right.
Is that right, Jared?
precisely.
Okay.
And that's what we call a thrusting attack.
So he's going to get the full energy of that arm.
Thrusting right here. I can do hooking motions. I can do uppercut motions. For example, if I'm here, and I'll just do it on you just real quick. I won't actually make contact, but I'll.
Yeah.
But basically, what I mean is if I go right here, 1, 2. And then I could do hooking motions and uppercut motions right here. It's the same thing like a boxer would do, okay? But I'm doing it with like here, 1, 2, and then 3, okay? Okay.
Is that
doing these motions here? Okay.
Is that what an MMA guy would do or not?
With the fists. Now, yes.
As opposed to the strikes you're talking about.
Open hand to preserve the integrity of these weapons, so I can continue using them. So,
Okay. And
now there's one more.
okay.
Which is a slashing. A lot of people don't, MMA will not train this, which is if he's here and I do this motion here. It could be accessing a weapon, maybe it's accessing a knife, right? Maybe the situation dictates that's feasible. So that angular strike is something you won't see in MMA.
How about targets? Multiple assailants, how important are targets? Where are you going to hit the guy, in other words?
And it's not
are you
just-
going to be dicking around here?
No. So, and it's not just multiple opponents. It could
It could be
a single.
anybody.
So,
Okay.
Now, things that
And
are
we're
not-
talking street fight here. This is not sport fighting, like you said.
So the things that are not allowed in an MMA situation, okay, the throat. Let's stop there. Okay. That's one of the most effective places I can strike. Now, granted, when you start going there, you should be able to potentially justify a higher level of force, deadly force. Okay. So, but the throat. Okay. Let's go to open hand to the eardrum. Okay, so that's a twofer right there, because not only can I potentially rupture the eardrum, but as I do that, there's nerves that run down behind the jaw that can potentially facilitate a knockout, the trigeminal nerves that run through here. So if I'm here, bang, right here.
Ouch. Just watching you go that fast, you can tell it's going to lay the dude out.
It'll potentially, yeah.
For some.
And I could do it
This is a voice of experience then, right?
Yeah, I've been hit by Jared plenty of times and it works.
This could be one, and two could be a forearm, which again is something they don't use, which would be here. Okay, brachial stun coming into the jaw. It's one of my favorite techniques. Is the hack, hacking, thrusting. Okay, it keeps distance, and also when you're using the technique effectively, it can be an effective technique. So the forearm now.
Those are all good.
Yeah. Now let's talk about more targets. Right here. It's not allowed in MMA, the back of the skull, because it's a dangerous place to hit. The occipital nerves sit in the back of the brain. Visual function. If you get hit hard there, it can cause temporary, even permanent blindness, knockouts. It's not allowed. But for a street fight, it makes it it's an effective target. If that level of force is justified, it's not. I'm not going to say it's. I mean, could it cause death potentially? Is it likely to cause death? No, but I'm not going to say never say never.
It may take the fight out of the guy, though.
Exactly,
and that's kind of what you want to do.
Really quick, and like I said, if you've ever been hit there at the back of the skull, things go black for a second, and it's the visual nerves in the brain, the occipital nerve. So
that's another good target.
Another good target in the back of the spine, the groin. Okay, the groin is a very, very effective. Now, it's not allowed in MMA fighting, but it can determine the outcome of a fight. If someone's coming at me and I just bang right there.
Do you have a pad where you can do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's what we call, that's a Muay Thai type kick. Now, if I was to take that same energy, in Muay Thai you don't wear shoes. Okay, MMA you don't wear shoes. So kicking with the ball of the foot, people do it effectively, but especially because you want to protect your toes and whatnot, the shin is even in a street situation, the shin is a great weapon. But if you just put the bag down, I just want to illustrate.
Is this another target you're talking about?
I believe. This is the same technique, but now I'm using my foot. So if I come here and I go right there in the groin, same technique. That power that I was putting in that, but I just go
boom.
Toes right to the groin. Or if I had the opening based on his position, that could be just right here. Okay? Bang. Okay? Techniques are not allowed in MMA. Now another one would be a technique coming through here.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Trying to hyperextend the knee. Okay. If I see his leg is forward, it's bang. Okay? Right here. Okay? So that's the technique. That's called a cross stomp. I'm coming through and I could be doing that as a hyperextension. If I had boots on, I could be scraping down the shin. Okay, I could be kicking, scraping, hitting to hyperextend the knee. So
those are some good targets.
Yeah.
Eyeballs, throat, back of the head, groin.
Yeah. So
leg area. Joint may be better said. So the knee.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.